Welcome back to the University of Maryland here in College Park, Maryland. Round one down, well, I should say the first match down here in the first round of today's World Premier Tournament. Moron's Cube taking the win 2-0 over Terrapins, Joey. But now we are turning our attention to match number 2. It is going to be Bnake Goblins going up against Team Trap Money. And they'll be next up here. It is going to be our 3 versus 6 seed here going up next. Winner will take on Moron's Cube. I don't know if I want to take on Moron's Cube being the number 1 seed. They played fairly well in their first matchup here. But nonetheless, these two teams now going head-to-head as we're loading into the round.
Yeah, Moron's Cube looking very strong overall, but showing some weaknesses as well. Definitely some vulnerabilities that could be exploited, and we'll see who ends up getting a chance at exploiting those soon.
All right, we are loading in, as we can see here on screen. Scorpions across the board once again. A lot of lasers as well as we are loading in. The teams loading into the amphitheater. It is Team Trap Money versus Bnake Goblins. Both teams making their way out of their hangar. Team Trap Money on the blue side, Bnake Goblins, pardon me, on the red side. Again, Scorpions across the board. As both teams looking for each other, they now have visual confirmation of where both teams are. Starting to use those buildings as well for defense. As right now, Bnake Goblins laying all the damage early on to Team Trap Money. Bnake Goblins pristine every single tank so far. Can't say the same for Team Trap Money. They're kind of trapped off into the side, just taking all the damage right now. The sides of every tank absolutely lit up.
Absolutely, John, and similar to what we saw with Moron Cube, we have Bnake Goblins going full lasers, each tank taking 3 lasers, and that damage coming out very early on.
Team Trap Money still receiving most of that damage. We just see a little damage being put down on Bnake Goblins already as well, but nothing in comparison. No one's core having been exposed yet, but Team Trap Money using those rotations, using those buildings to try to stay aware. Bnake over there trying to make the flank play with the McCool. Koi in trouble, being lit up once again. Now we're seeing all 3 players for Team Trap Money using different buildings for shelter. They realize that their plates have received a lot of damage. Now they're focusing on using those buildings for additional help. Koi moving around the side, trying to be sneaky there on Bnake. Put down a little bit of damage there, but not enough to make a difference.
Trying to be coy, rather, John. Yeah, in the end, because their plating is falling so quickly, they have to use these buildings. Whether it be strategic or not, they don't really have much of a choice, as they are all yellow all around the board.
Now, in comparison to the first match we saw here on stream today, this one being played a little bit slower. They're taking their time. They're focused more on their positioning. Moron's Cube were definitely the aggressive there in map 1. Pardon me, in the first match that we saw. Here in the second match, both teams prioritizing where those buildings are for that extra help, and especially, like we said before, Joey, with Bnake Goblins laying down that damage early on to Team Trap Money, it is almost something they have to prioritize now going forward.
Absolutely, but with a team like Team Trap Money taking so much damage early on and going into lasers who don't want to stay this far away, you just continue to see that tick damage come down time and time again.
And there we have the first core exposed, and believe it or not, it's on Bnake Goblins, the McCool. This core exposed, taking 10 damage already. If you were to ask me 3 minutes ago if I thought Bnake Goblins will take their core damage first, I would have told you absolutely no way. Team Trap Money has all the damage right now. Right there, a man.zip has damage to his front right panel already. It's already in the red, super exposed. Now Bang also dropping down to 46 on the core. All 3 cores for Bnake Goblins exposed. The long game for Team Trap Money is starting to pay off.
And it looks like Bang is over there on the side, but overall the damage continuing to come down time and time again. Bnake with those 2 cores exposed, 1 completely down, now 2 still exposed.
Bangos is down for Bnake Goblins into the 3v2 in favor of Team Trap Money. 80% and 70% for the last 2 remaining players on Bnake Goblins, the McCool and Bnake in trouble. Bnake dropping down to 26. That core is super exposed. A man has his core exposed as well. He's down to 81 and no damage. It's now a 3v1. Bnake, the last man standing for Bnake Goblins.
John, this has gone south so quickly for Bnake Goblins, starting off so heavily with getting armor plating in yellow for everyone on Team Trap Money. Unfortunately, from there, it just fell off.
And that is the win for Team Trap Money. The long game paid off. It was a little bit of a slower start here, but it ended up working in their advantage. All that damage came out against them as soon as that match first started, but then they prioritized using those buildings and making the damage rotate along all the plates. It's all about positioning. It's all about using those buildings to help prevent extra damage onto your vehicle. That's what we saw. The long game paid off for.
Absolutely, a big turnaround there. Bnake Goblins getting up early, putting yellow really on every single bit of plating that was available for the opposing team. But then eventually those buildings coming into play, as you said, the rotations around those completing, really becoming another set of armor for that set of tanks. And in the end, that was the difference.
Absolutely. And the one thing that I love to point out here is that we're seeing two different kinds of play styles in our first two matches here for the World Premier Tournament of Core Disruption. In the first match, we saw a very ultra high aggressive, essentially pound them in the face kind of play style here in the first match. Here in the second match, it's a little bit slower. It's more about positioning. It's more about taking your time and making sure you get those high damage hits on the other team's vehicles. And that's what we ended up seeing here as Bnake Goblins started out well, but unfortunately in the end, it didn't work out for them.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot more kiting in this matchup in particular. The last one, as you said, going head to head, going pretty close to one another early on. This one kiting around the edge of the map and kind of getting those quick hits in.
Absolutely. While we're waiting to load into game number 2, one of the things we have seen in both matches is the use of these laser weapons. And there's a lot of things that you have to keep in mind when you use laser weapons, especially the heat. So like a lot of laser weapons we see in other games as well, they have a tendency to overheat, so there is a cooldown period. We saw it a little bit in the first match where all the tanks on the map had to cool down a little bit and there was no action. That's what happens with laser. It's a great way for you to put damage down long distance and over time, but it does have that cooldown period, so it does have its drawbacks as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's where you use the buildings as well, John. You rotate around when you're on that cooldown. That'll help reduce the damage that you end up taking and allow you to rotate back up when the cooldown is off.
Yeah, absolutely. We are just moments away from match number 2 in this best of 3 series. Team Trap Money looking good so far. Playing the long game pays off for them. They have the 1-0 lead in the series. They are 1 game away from a date with the number 1 seed in Morons Cubed. It'll be 2 very different play styles when they do match up in the later round, if that is how this match ends up. We'll have to see if the ultra aggressive or the more laid back play style plays better, as the meta is still playing itself out here with this game. Still in development here, but looks very good so far.
I got last screen. Since there was a crash, we're gonna do a rerun of this first match. Yeah, right. Very good. Yeah. All right. Guys. There was a crash on the other side, so we're gonna do a.
Yeah, I got kind of like this. Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean,
And the guy ran into the wall. Yeah, I think he had some. Okay, so. Did one of you host? I hosted. Okay. Chris hosted.
All right, so we are just getting word here real quick that one of the players' computers crashed during that last match, so they are investigating to determine when that crash occurred. If it occurred in the game, it looks like we'll go ahead and do a replay of that first match. But until we find out from tournament officials, we're going to throw it to a very quick break, and on the other side, we'll have the results of that first match, and we'll let you know if we'll be replaying. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. right, we are back, and the official ruling has been determined, Joey. We're going to go ahead and replay match number 1 as the crash did occur in-game. So we'll get a repeat of that first match here between Bnake Goblins and Team Trap Money. And we'll kind of, the big thing to see here is, will both of these teams stick to their same strategy of being a little bit patient, waiting the other team out here, or they're going to try to change it up now that both teams know how they play?
Yeah, I think the other thing to look at here was Bnake Goblins going full lasers. They ended up running 9 lasers there, and they did pull the loss in the end. There was the crash involved, but do we see that setup change as well?
This is, we're about to load into the replay of match 1 of this best of 3 series. Again, the winner will move on to take on the number 1 seed in Morons Cubed. And Joey, we have our answer right there. Bnake Goblins, 3 Scorpions, all rocking lasers on all players.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be mirror setups, but not per team, but rather per player of each team here. We do have some different weapons coming out from the side of Team Trap Money.
So as the players are about to load into the map, it'll be Amphitheater once again. Both teams making their way out of the hangars. A lot of questions here. Will the teams stick to their original game strategy of playing for that longer game? Where we saw in the first edition of this game, just a few moments ago before we took that break, that both teams played a little more passive. They waited each other out here a little bit, using those buildings to their advantage. We'll see if they change it up and see if anyone tries to be a little bit more aggressive. And right now we're seeing the damage, just like we saw before in the game that's now being replayed. A lot of the damage flowing from Bnake Goblins to Team Trap Money, taking the damage right now here early on.
That worked really well last time, John, but I do like the little bit of a change up here as well, where we are seeing them start to use the buildings more than they did last game. Instead of just going out full damage, they are playing a little bit more defensive as well.
And we're seeing Team Trap Money not grouping up either. They're kind of rotating around, making sure they each have a building that they can duck behind if they start taking a lot of damage. Like right now, 2 players for Team Trap Money has damage all over the take. In fact, Koi has that front panel almost completely exposed right now. That is going to be very hard. Now it is completely exposed, and he's taking damage from the front side of the tank. He's going to have to find a way to strike using sideways motion, trying to limiting the amount, how much of his front of the tank is being exposed, and he's not doing it right now. Down to 36 health on that core. Bnake also taking damage as well, down to 56 on his core as well. 2 players on each side with very low core health here early on in the match.
Absolutely, sacrifices being made. Those Bnake went in to lay down that damage on Koi, which Koi does go down here. Core disrupted, John, but Bnake took a lot of damage as well.
Bnake in danger as well, and Bango's also dropping down to 90 health as well on the core. Needs to really utilize that back right panel. Is still pristine for Bangos. Bnake is down as well. It's a 2v2 now for Team Trap Money going up against Bnake Goblins. We saw this happen last time as well. Bnake Goblins ended up on the back end of this, and Bangos falls down. It's now 2v1. Bnake Goblins in trouble as the McCool is the last player standing. And he is trying to rotate around, getting stuck around that building. Great job by Team Trap Money kind of splitting up, forcing McCool to focus on one target or the other. They're going to force him around, a little bit of ring around the Rosie action here. They're trying to move around the McCool, putting down the damage on Aman. Not going to last too much longer, 20 health left. And McCool will drop down, core disrupted across the board, and Team Trap Money in the replay takes round 1 of this best of 3.
They do, John. They take it once again, but unfortunately there was another bug crash going on there. The computer ended up going down in the end, so that one might be replayed depending on when that ended up happening.
3rd time's a charm, right? I mean, who doesn't want to see this played again for the 3rd time? It's going to be absolutely fantastic. Both of these 2 teams, from what we've seen so far in the first playthrough and now the second playthrough, have been absolutely fantastic. The aggressiveness, the strategy that they are using those buildings for advantage is absolutely fantastic for using it to cover themselves as their plates are being exposed. Words, it's difficult sometimes. It's a Saturday. But nonetheless, both of these teams sticking true to their strategy that we saw the first go around, and it's paying off again there in round 2, and hopefully we'll see it again in the 3rd round as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's now starting to wonder, is the 3 laser strategy working too well for these teams? Like Morons Cubed had some close matches. They did run that same strategy. Now looking at this team as well, Bnake losing once again with it.
Okay, so we are being told that even with the crash, this match will count. So it is a 1-0 in favor of Team Trap Money after that second replay. So it'll be 1-0 Team Trap Money here in the best of 3. So they're in prime position here to move on if they're able to take the win here in the second match, pending any crashes as well. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we won't get that. But nonetheless, that strategy of waiting towards the middle part of that game, using the buildings to protect their tanks is really paying off in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Using slower weapons, laying down that damage, though, they do take quite a bit up front, but then, again, the rotations around the buildings, allowing them to mitigate some of that damage, and in the end, lay it right back.
So really the question now comes down to is, for Bnake Goblins, what do you change going forward? You're one match away from being eliminated. You're going up against a team that seems to have your number. They're being patient. They're making you be the aggressor. What do you change going forward here to try to force the third game?
I mean, the big thing right now is Bnake Goblins running a little bit quicker weaponry so they can move up aggressively. We saw it a little bit in that last match, but then they need to peel out quickly too, because if that heavy damage comes in, it does work.
Absolutely. So strategies need to be changed, as both teams are loading in here into the second round of this best of 3 series. Just moments away from that being loaded up as players getting into that lobby, maybe helping a player out here to load back in. And the game is still, it is the world premiere for this game. There are still a lot of things still to come in this game. A lot more, there's more vehicles coming out, there's more weapons coming out, and there's more maps coming out. So by no means is this the finished product. There's a lot more great stuff coming around the corner.
Yeah, absolutely. Just getting a sample of what we have today. Again, just hover tanks running as well. There will be treaded tanks as an option in the full game too.
Looks like Team Trap Money is good to go. See one of the players give the nice little thumbs up there. And it looks like we're going to go ahead and we're going to send it to a quick break here for just a moment as the players are still loading up into the lobby for the second game here in the best of 3. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Core Disruption. Match number 2 of Bnake Goblins versus Team Trap Money coming up next. It is a 1-0 advantage for Team Trap Money. They are just 1 win away from a date with the top seed here in today's event in Morons Cubed. Joey, taking a look at the tanks again, Scorpions across the board, but we are seeing some changes in the weapons department.
Yeah, it looks like they're not going to run full lasers on every tank at this point, which is probably a welcome change coming in from Bnake Goblins.
Both teams have loaded into the amphitheater. Team Trap Money back on the blue side, Bnake Goblins back on the red.
So as they try to find themselves here, John, let's hit on a couple more of the weapons. So we've obviously seen the laser a lot in today's matchup, that one laying down quite a bit of damage. But the other one that we see Team Trap Money running a lot is the Plasma Bolter. It's got a low rate of fire, but overall a moderate projectile speed that lays down heavy damage.
Once again, both teams going towards the north side of the map. Koi taking the initial damage here for Team Trap Money. But it seems both teams playing an even more less aggressive style here, as Koi's pretty much the only one taking the damage. Now Walsh taking the damage as well. And now Aman's taking the damage as well. So again, we're seeing the same kind of strategy come out here from Bnake Goblins. The damage flowing in their favor on the Team Trap Money. But we saw this play out in 2 maps here before. That doesn't mean anything for Trap Money. They're still able to come back.
Yeah, exactly. Bnake Goblins able to lay down quite a bit of damage. You see a lot of yellow on the tanks of Team Trap Money. Unfortunately for them, that Plasma Vulture just laying down such heavy damage and it equalizes out much quicker than we expected.
And we're seeing Team Trap Money, they're pretty far apart from each other. We're seeing Bnake Goblins stay together as more of a coherent group. In the end, we'll see if that actually pays out for them, as Walsh now taking the damage for Team Trap Money. Core exposed and rapidly dropping down to 50% health left for Walsh, now down to 30. He is in trouble with that front panel fully exposed, and he will be the first one down as his core is disrupted. It is now 3v2 in favor of Bnake Goblins.
Bnake Goblins painting Walsh like a fence in the backyard, John, just laser upon laser, continuing to lay them down and takes out the core in the end.
I like it, the laser brush in the backyard. I have to try that next time, but nonetheless, Bango's in trouble, down to 60 on his core as well, as Team Trap Money is looking to even this up at 2v2. Koi in trouble as well. All 3 players for Bnake Goblins rotating around on top of him. A man trying to flank to the side, but Koi's in trouble, under 50 on his core health now. The front fully exposed, dropping quickly, and Koi's the next one down.
Koi is down, Banute is exposed, Bangos is exposed as well. 70 and 60 on the damage for them. Unfortunately, it is now a 1v3 for Team Trap Money.
And for Aman, it's not so bad damage-wise. The panels are still looking good. 2 ports exposed on the side of Bnake Goblins. It is a tall task to 1v3 in any game, let alone here in core disruption as well. It is going to take great positioning and great aim to really make a massive comeback, but that comeback story is going to come to an end very quickly as Aman is getting deleted here later in the back end of this game, and it is all even at 1 apiece between Team Trap Money and Bnake Goblins.
Absolutely, John. Changing up that strategy seemed to work for the best here. Pulling in that Plasma Bolter ended up allowing them to lay down that extra damage.
Absolutely, and 3v1ing is never fun if you're on the one side. Let's be honest here. That is a tough challenge, but in a perfect position here for Aman there is the fact that 2 of those tanks had their cores fully open. So the damage was already there. It was possible. It's a tall task. It's very difficult to try to do that, not just here in core disruption, but in pretty much any game out there. 3v1, very, very difficult. So Bnake Goblins evens this one up at 1 apiece. We're heading to our first game 3 here today at the World Premier Tournament.
Absolutely, and I don't think we see too many adjustments coming in here. It looked like both teams had the setups. Unfortunately, just some 3v1s early on. As we mentioned, the lasers just kind of painting away at cores of Team Trap Money. If they can avoid those situations of being taken on 2v1s or 3v1s, they should be able to go back to what we saw in the original game.
So we did see some changes there in that second match from Bnake Goblins, mainly when it came to weapons, and it paid off. It was a gamble that worked. Maybe it was a gamble, maybe it wasn't a gamble. Maybe they practiced it, and they just pulled it out of their back pocket here when they were down 1-0 after that first map. But it seemed to work. It's probably something they're going to stick with going forward here, going into game 3.
Yeah, I think the other thing that worked really well was grouping up. Initially, we saw them spread out a little bit more, and now they grouped up. And they really tackled one target overall, kind of going for picks like you see in some other esports titles, and that ended up being a big difference maker, getting that early advantage.
Yeah, so that really kind of answers the question there. Is spreading out or grouping up the better option? Well, if one team is playing far apart and you're staying together as a group, it is so much easier to pick players off when it's a 3v1 situation, because now the other two players on the other team have to find a way to rotate around to provide assistance, and a lot of time it's a little bit too late.
Yeah, and the other thing is to watch out for flanks. We saw those in the first game, the one that ended up crashing. But in the end, those flank opportunities can come in. If you circle down on one person, you can potentially leave your side or your back exposed, and that could be a huge difference maker as well.
Absolutely. So one game apiece for both of these teams as we head into Game 3. The final match here of this best of 3. The winner will go on to take on Morons Cubed in the next round. Still 2 more rounds of matches coming up after this match as well. Match 3 and 4 for our other competitors as well. As you can see on your screen, Shadow Assassin, it's probably Shadow Assassins, there we go. Assassins going up against Savage Academy. Joey, it is going to be a long night if I have to keep doing that. And then Garfelth going up against Thonk will close out the first round as we are looking to crown a champion here today at the world premiere tournament of Core Disruption. Again, thousands of dollars on the line. Who doesn't love money, especially if you're a college student? Money is always great.
Absolutely, John. It'll be exciting to see who ends up taking this one, as you said, going into that final best of 3. I'm really excited to see what adjustments we do see coming out. Again, for me, it's not as much the weapons as the grouping. I think the grouping advantage ended up being really good for Bnake Goblins here, changing that strategy up.
So now if you're Team Trap Money and you realize that the spreading out tactic didn't really work if the other team's grouping up and picking you off one by one, how do you make that change as well? Do you group up as well, possibly risking a lot of damage being spread across 3 players at the very beginning of the team, or do you try to see if that spread out tactic will work, just maybe be a little bit more aggressive, work on those flanks a little bit more, maybe have a 3-way flank where you kind of surround them all together if they're going to stay grouped up?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility, and we saw with the lasers, it seems like Bnake Goblins is going to lay down that damage early regardless of who they end up going after. It just comes down to the grouping of Team Trap Money as well. I think personally you go for some kind of rotation. You do have that plasma bolter coming out, so that's going to lay that pinpoint damage, very high damage as well, but you just got to find a way to get those shots.
So in Game 2, Bnake Goblins was the one that had their backs against the wall. They had to make some changes going into Game 2, and it paid off. Now it's Team Trap Money who needs to make the changes as well, as it is even at 1 apiece across the board heading into map 3 of this best of 3 series between Bnake Goblins and Team Trap Money. Again, Scorpions across the board, and we're seeing those changes with those weapons pretty much stick here for Game 3 as well.
Yeah, no lasers either from the side of Team Trap Money. It looks like they're going to mainly stick to those plasma bolters, laying down that high damage over time. It does take a little bit longer to take those shots, but in the end, they do lay that high damage.
The teams are loading into the amphitheater just moments away from Game 3, the deciding match between Team Trap Money and Bnake Goblins. As both teams are out of their hangars and they are looking for each other. We'll see if Bnake Goblins keeps that tactic of grouping together. We'll see if Team Trap Money will stay spread out. Right now, it looks like they're going to stick together as well, being a little bit more patient, kind of weighing towards the center of the map a bit. Meanwhile, Bnake Goblins swinging around the outside of the map. This is definitely a different style of play than what we saw in the beginning, but with a small map like Amphitheater, it's just a matter of seconds before they find each other.
Yeah, and it looks like the spotting has been done as Koi is starting to take some damage on the time of Team Trap Money from those lasers on the side of Bnake Goblins. A little bit being traded back and forth, though, as Bnake takes some front left as well.
Team Trap Money being incredibly patient, using those buildings to their advantage as well. Man's taking damage on the front end. Koi damage spread all over the panels, along with Walsh taking damage all over the tank as well. On the side of Bnake Goblins, they're looking pretty good. Bnuk's the only one has, I wouldn't say too much significant damage, but it's all isolated to the front end of the tank, as Team Trap Money still kind of being passive here. The aggressiveness coming from Bnake Goblins, and that might come back to hurt them.
But we've seen this time and time again, John. They lay down that damage, and it comes through nicely. The thing is all about separating them from the opposing players. Amon possibly being pulled down here by Bnake.
Bnake and the McCool trying to rotate around. They bump into each other there a little bit, as now all the teams are kind of rotating around in a circle there now, as Bangos ends up backing in to one of the structures. He's kind of stuck there a little bit. That's going to be an advantage for Team Trap Money. Can they take advantage of it? Bango's down to 12 on the core, and Bangos might be the first one to go. He will be the first one to go. Bumping into that building cost him dearly, as he's the first one to drop in the deciding game.
Yeah, a little bit of a dip there in the end. Ends up being a huge difference maker. Still, the damage is done to Team Trap Money. All the plating very yellow. That core almost fully exposed, but still a little bit of damage needing to be done by those lasers on the side of Bnake Goblins.
Now Team Trap Money with the one-player advantage, trying to make the most of it. Koi trying to flank around onto Bnake. Bnake will drop down. The gamble paid off. It's now a 3v1. Team Trap Money 1 kill away from advancing.
John, Team Trap Money taking quite a bit of damage on their plating, but the core is fully there. 300 health between them. While on the side of the McCool, not fully exposed yet, but it's getting close.
McCool has some damage to the core, down to 60. He is in trouble. The 3v1 dream will die with the McCool as Team Trap Money advances to take on the #1 seed next round in Morons Cubed.
And John, you saw the damage from the Plasma Bolter there as well, just lighting up that core when it comes out. It's slow and steady. It doesn't have the fastest rate of fire, but when it comes down, that high damage does as well.
So let's talk a little bit about the strategy we saw here in the third map for Team Trap Money. They definitely played a lot slower than we saw in the first two maps. They allowed Bnake Goblins to be the aggressor. And sometimes that gamble really does pay off, because when the other team starts to feel comfortable being the aggressor, they take gambles and risks that don't really pay off always. And if they don't pay off, you get exposed, and that's exactly what we saw. Team Trap Money took that to their advantage and made them pay.
Yeah, in every single one of these matches, Bnake Goblins laying down the damage early, but then moving in. When they were able to corner a player and kind of get a pick off, it ended up working very well. But when it was a classic 3-on-3, that damage ended up coming right back at him through that Plasma Bolter.
And then if there is a today's feels bad moment, is when you're backing your tank up and there happens to be a building there. And then you get stuck, and then next thing you know, your core is disrupted. Situational awareness is absolutely key in a game like Core Disruption, especially in the VR component of this game, where you actually have to physically swivel your head around to figure out where you are when you're on the map. It adds a completely different element to this game. It's very unique. It's a lot of fun, but at the same time, you have to actually look behind at all times as well.
Absolutely, and that's something we can touch on as well. So as you guys can see on screen, they are wearing VR headsets, but they're also on mouse and keyboard, so a little bit different from what you typically have in a VR title.
Absolutely. It's a little bit of a hybrid between traditional esports like we see with that mouse and keyboard setup versus VR, where they have like an Oculus controller in your hand as well. So a nice little hybrid between what we see in traditional esports and VR gaming as well. Very, very exciting. So with that, we are going to throw it to a quick break, but don't go anywhere. The next match is around the corner. You're watching the world premiere tournament of Core Disruption live from the University of Maryland.